Toss aside the touchy-feely notions of love in business and recognize the real power it holds. Welcome to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast with host Steve Farber. Drawing on his work with a wide variety of companies from the Fortune 100 to smaller family-owned businesses, Farber shares inspiring interviews with business leaders and proven strategies for how you can create experiences that your customers will love by developing a culture that your employees, teammates, and colleagues love working in. Discover why and how love, at the end of the day, is just damn good business for you too. Here's your host, Steve Farber.
Hi, this is Steve Farber, and welcome to another episode of the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. You can find this episode and all the other episodes at stevefarber.com/podcast, where you can listen to it. You can watch it on video, you can read the entire transcript, or you could do all of them, depending on what kind of mood you're in. My guest today is the one and only John J.J. French, who is the founder of, the guitarist for, and the manager of the iconic rock and roll band Twisted Sister. Now, you've probably heard the name Twisted Sister before, but if you're not exactly placing it, I know you know the song I Wanna Rock and the really iconic song We're Not Gonna Take It. Well, that's Twisted Sister. And John is the guy that started that band over 40 years ago. He's an incredible storyteller. He is a phenomenal entrepreneur. He's that rare blend of musician, artist, and business person all rolled into one. We have a great conversation coming right up. Freewheeling, a little bit on the, let's call it, rated R end of the language spectrum. So you may want to keep that in mind before you jump in. But I'm sure you're going to have a great time with us. Here he is, my friend, John J.J. French. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. I'm your host, Steve Farber, and my guest today is John J.J. French, who is let's see, what can I say? He is the founder of the iconic rock band Twisted Sister. But not only is he the founder, he's also a guitar player for the band. But not only is he the founder and a guitar player for the band, he's also the manager of the band. He's the business guy. He does their licensing deals. He's the guy. He is the guy behind Twisted Sister, and that is his baby. And he is my baby, but that's not right. That wouldn't sound right at all. But he is my dear friend.
He's not having your baby either. Let's just say that.
Neither is he my baby, nor is he having it. But John, welcome to the podcast.
Who are you?
And what do you want?
And what do you want? Who the hell are you, and what do you want from me?
What do you want? So let me start with a really basic question. You are a person who has been through many names in your life. Your born name that it says on your birth certificate is what?
John French Segal.
John French Segal.
Yes.
Nowadays, you are known to millions as JJ French.
Yes.
Your friends know you as John French.
Yes.
They also know that you're JJ French, but your friends call you John.
Right.
So what's it like going through life with all these different names?
Well, you know how close friends of De Niro call him Bobby, but you got to be really close to him, right? So Joe Pesci goes, so Bobby and I were out, but you can't say Bobby if you're not that close, right? I mean,
yeah.
I have a friend who got Dylan his first apartment in New York City in 1961 when he came from Minnesota. And he was Dylan's first producer. He calls him Bobby Dylan.
Yeah.
We don't call him Bobby Dylan. Nobody calls him Bobby Dylan. Nobody. But he does, right? Johnny is used by the old Jewish ladies in my building who knew me when I was a little kid. Johnny.
Just so people know, you live in the same, not only the same building, but the same apartment that you lived in when you were
for like 62 years. Whatever. So the people still alive. They go, hey, I knew him. And the thing is, as the older they get, the shorter they get. So when they put their arm up to show my height, I knew him when he was so big. Well, according to some of them, I was a foot tall when they met. I knew him and he was. So there are some people that call me Johnny. I mean, there's a tiny little group that can do that. John is used in Manhattan, for example, unless it's purely a business situation, it's never JJ. JJ is used as a business name, and close friends, call me John, like your close friends call you Steve, but everyone else calls you SS. We know how that works. But so JJ became this nickname because it was created for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was that I ascertained early on in the band's career that people who were drunk don't remember names. So if you can make it easy for them to remember a name, they can heckle you better during the course of a night when it's easier to come out. So John sucks. It doesn't work as much as, hey, JJ, you suck. So JJ comes out better actually, most people don't ever put these two together, but one of my favorite guitar players is B.B. King, JJ French.
Yeah.
I'm a blues guitar player. So I liked the brevity of JJ. So it became this name. And in the early days of the band, hey, JJ, hey. So it became and it just got picked up after that. And then it became, do I want to spell it? How do I want to spell it? That confuses even more.
Right.
So now I'm
Jay.
Right. So now I'm John JJ French Segal. So in the early days of getting our platinum records, which you can see some behind me, the record label had my name Segal on the plaque. It would be John JJ French Segal. So when my daughter Samantha was about to be born, given the fact that my wife would not take my last name, none of them ever do. They don't take Segal. Well, we'll get into Sharon because that's more confusing ever because her husband's last name. And Segal. All right. But I wanted to make it simpler. So my wife, Samantha's mom's last name is Brock, right? Brock. And I am John Segal, but JJ French. So is my daughter going to be Samantha French Brock Segal? Like it's just like it's one of those Spanish names that go on forever. Martinez, Hotana, Velazquez, Havana, like it was kind of I knew a girl named Tessa Martinez Sutherland Koningsberger. I had a girlfriend with that kind with these long names. So I said, how can I make it simple? So when I did two things before my daughter was born to make my life simpler. Number one, I legally changed my name to John French. Bingo. That's legally my name. That's what I signed. And then, because I did not have a high school diploma, because I dropped out of high school, I decided I wanted to have a high school diploma before my daughter was born. So we could say that her father is a high school graduate. Because even though it can be argued that I really didn't need a high school diploma to validate who I am, and given the fact, Steve, that I do motivational speaking to not only college graduates, but guys with multiple degrees, and they're taking actual advice from me, and I'm a high school dropout. I had all the fun and they didn't. I decided to take the equivalency diploma. So I did. And it arrived 3 days before my daughter was born. So those are the two things I accomplished when my daughter was born. So my name officially, John French, professionally, JJ French. So when we, meaning you and me, Steve, we're discussing how do you introduce me, and me being a little schizophrenic about the John, the JJ, I said, why don't I just say John JJ French? That's it. So the ones who call me JJ, which is most people like we'll meet in professional circumstances, they'll always say JJ. The only people who call me John are you and, small Veronica, small group where
right.
People call me John because you guys know me. And when you're in New York City, in my neighborhood, you never call me JJ because you know me personally. You know me.
Right. On the other hand, in New York City, I remember the first time I visited you in New York, we were going to go out to dinner, and there was a place that you wanted to go. It was hard to get into, and I will never forget this. You picked up the phone, you called the restaurant, and you said, "Yeah, hi, this is JJ French for the band Twisted Sister. Can you get me in tonight?" So that was not John French. That was
No.
J.J. French making the reservation.
Yeah, that was my alter ego, Michael Hall, working on behalf of JJ French. Because, in the words of Tony Danza, when asked how famous he was, he said, "I'm famous enough to get a doctor when I need it and a reservation in a restaurant." And I have to say, that's my level of celebrity. I am well enough known so I can get into any doctor's office as, oh, the guy from Twisted Sister needs to see you. He's dying of hangnail cancer. He needs someone to do an MRI. I can get in right away. And of course, being the neurotic Jew that I am, that's how I'm going to die. Hangnail cancer it's a newly discovered cancer. You ever notice how Jews always have the best doctors? And being Jewish, I can say this. You ever notice like, oh, and my son, he went the world's greatest doctor. He invented prostate cancer. His name was Irving Prostate Cancer. And they named the disease after him. Every Jew has the best. I can say this, right? I'm Jew. I can say this. Why is it every Jew has the best doctor? Anyway, so when I need to get into a restaurant, here's the embarrassing part. Calling up and using your name and they don't know you. That's truly a humbling experience.
I said, what?
Well, yes. And it's not automatic that they know because sometimes they don't know. And then it's really, or they kind of know and it's a sophisticated restaurant. They Google you right on the phone. Who is this? JJ Twisted Sister. And they see, and they now can corroborate this while they're talking to you because they pretend they know who you are. But being unknown is embarrassing. Hence this description of when I visited my aunt and uncle in Florida back in the 80s at the peak of my success, incidentally, at the peak. I mean, so now I'm super as famous as I'm going to be. I'm visiting my Aunt Tinny and Uncle Irving I had two Uncle Irvings, which is the Jewish version of Daryl and Daryl from the Bob Newhart show. I had two Uncle Irvings and between them, they had one good eye. So they picked me up at the airport and the car's going all over the freaking highway. And I'm like, can you pull over? I'm driving. The two of you in the back, I'm driving. So my Aunt Ruth and my Aunt Tinny take me to dinner at 5:30 in the evening at some restaurant in Fort Lauderdale. And of course, everyone's wearing sweaters. It's 1,000 degrees out. We walk in the restaurant and my Aunt Tinny goes, "This is my nephew, Johnny. He's in the Twisted Sisters." The what? The Twisted Sisters, they're not taking something or they want to do something. This is so humbling. I go, listen, Ruth, Tinny, do me a favor. You don't have to. I'm just your nephew. Let's go out to dinner. You don't have to tell Roberta 5 tables over that he's in the Twisted Sisters. So you learn how to deal with this humbly over time and you learn to deal with your names. And so my name is, but one thing I will say, in my neighborhood, there are some guys who I've known all my life. There's very few left that are alive. They call me by my real last name, Segal, because in the neighborhood, I was Yo Segal. That would be it.
Right. So
occasionally you will hear Yo Segal, and that guy
been around.
We went to public school.
Yeah. And so speaking of names, when I was, so Twisted Sister was at its first heyday before the band, and we'll talk about this a little bit. The arc was basically you guys fought, worked for years and years in the Jersey clubs and the Holy Grail was to get a record deal. You came really close to getting a record deal many times and it fell apart. You guys were like the embodiment of tenacity. And then finally you get a record deal and then you have, we're not going to take it. I want to rock. You've made it to the big time. And after that, you basically stopped everything and then came back together around 2001 and you finished your career at a high, playing these huge festivals. But in the heyday before that last resurgence of the band, when, gold record time and platinum record time and all of that, I knew who you were. I knew who the band was. It wasn't my kind of music. I I happen to know that this was also your kind of music, but I just know that. But your personal kind of music, so my kind of music was, the band and Dylan and the Grateful Dead, and then, the folk stuff. John Prine was my idol, and these guys like that. But I always thought the name Twisted Sister was a name I recognized. The name Twisted Sister was like the greatest freaking band name ever. And I still think that. What a phenomenal name. So when you and I, first started to get to know each other, and I first started to hear your story, I was so curious to hear where the name came from. So could you just tell us the brilliant moment that the name Twisted Sister came to be?
Well, Steve, you and I have been working on a book since Moby Dick was a minnow, right? That's the book. It's called Moby Dick was a minnow. It's the history of me and my business. And Steve is my not only my co-writer, my mentor. The reason why I'm even doing this is, unfortunately, this gentleman I have to thank for the rest of my goddamn professional life. But I've been telling this story for a long time, but I never told the real story. And
by the way, the name of the book is not Since Moby Dick Was a Minnow. It's Twisted Business, just to be clear. But
who came up with that title, by the way? So what if I say I lied about it? I'm only going to divulge it in the book. Finally, that's a big teaser, isn't it? Like, I never felt this. I mean, no, I mean, if you watch the documentary, you would know. The band was called Silver Star, which is an absolutely horrible name. And, it was a glitter band in 1972. It was like, there's the New York Dolls. So it's September 72, October, November. I'm looking for a band. And there's glitter bands that are all over New York City, all of a sudden. So there's Dolls, Teenage Lust, Eric and the Magic Tramps, all these kind of quasi transvestite makeup-y bands in the Lower East Side, which was weird. And I'll tell you why it was weird, because Steve, we talk about the band or Dylan, right? Or we could even say the Beach Boys or the Grateful Dead or Led Zeppelin or Jeff Beck, Rod Stewart. I mean, all the Jimi Hendrix, all these great artists had just come through New York every weekend at the Fillmore East, weekend after weekend after weekend. And you would think that these musicians watching these artists every week for $3, by the way, aspire to be greater musicians. And what we're watching is the greatest contemporary rock musicians in the world on a weekly basis, right? Led Zeppelin and Savoy Brown and the Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane and the Who, and they just coming in, Rolling Stones every weekend, $2, $3. And if you couldn't afford $3, you saw them in Central Park for $1. It was Ike and Tina Turner and the Beach Boys every week. So you would think that the overarching desire to be great would be the next generation of musicians. And of course, I'm that next generation. So I'm going to the Fillmore every week and I'm practicing, and I come home after seeing the Allman Brothers and I'm practicing, and I'd see the Dead and I'm practicing, and I'd see Zeppelin opening for Iron Butterfly and Canned Heat, and I'm practicing. And what's the culmination of that? The worst, shittiest bands on the planet evolve out in New York. Guys who can't play to save their ass. The Dolls, Teenage Lust, the Ramones. Come on. Like, it's funny. It's hysterically funny. It's cute. But what the fuck does that have to do with musicianship, right? It's kind of like they all woke up one day and said, let's just suck and look good. Why bother actually having to play? Why bother? Let's just get stoned and look good and be stupid. And bingo, what happens? Bowie comes out with a masterful record, Ziggy Stardust. Lou Reed comes out with a masterful record called Transformer. Mott the Hoople comes out with a masterful record called All the Young Dudes. T-Rex comes out with a masterful record called Electric Warrior. But in New York, these freaking mooks are playing like 4-year-olds buying guitar at Manny's Music, just learning how to play Stairway to Heaven. You would just sit there, ding, 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 and you go, why do they suck so bad? So I was stunned by the. I'm going to get to the answer of your question.
I trust that you will. That's all right. Go ahead.
So I've been thinking about this lately. Like, why is it that that is what we deduced, that punk comes out of that? Because punk is just an excuse for you can't. I mean, alternative and punk is like, you can't play, you can be an alternative band. So it's called an alternative to talent. It's alternative to songwriting. It's alternative to singing. If your voice sucks like mine does, like, I can't sing. That's why I do Dylan songs. Like, that's why God created Lou Reed and Dylan. So guys like me can sing, which is fine. They're geniuses. But the shit that these bands were playing, I don't care what anybody says. You want to call them great, that's your business. I think you're all freaking nuts. So anyway, here's the thing. The fall of 72, Bowie, by the way, who had one of the best bands in the Spiders from Mars. Great players. Mick Ronson, phenomenal player. Mott, phenomenal players. We get crap, and I would go see the Dolls all the time. And how, Steve, we talk about what makes an entrepreneur. Like, what is an entrepreneur? What really is an entrepreneur? And I've deduced that an entrepreneur, you become an entrepreneur for one of two reasons, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you either have invented something the world's never seen before and you can't wait to show it to the world, or you're going to improve something that existed before and you can't wait to show it to the world, and you'll risk everything in the process. Does that pretty much sum up 99% of?
It's a good portion of it. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, good. So you either came up with an idea that was totally unique and you'll risk everything to show it, or you want to improve something that already exists and you're willing to risk everything to show it. Well, coming up with a rock band is not a unique idea. There've been plenty of them before, but can I improve on a rock band? Right. So there's my thesis. So there's the Dolls, who look great and can't play to save their ass.
So the dolls dressed in drag, basically.
Yeah. I mean, and it's all over the internet. I mean, they're famous, and the cover of their album, and I saw them a lot because they played a lot, and I knew Johnny Thunders as a druggie when I was a druggie, because we were druggies together, and I had personal friends who were personal friends with Billy and Sid. Billy was the original drummer who died before the Dolls made it famous. And they would drag me to the Mercer Art Center. And I'd go every week. And I'd sit there and go, wow, God, this band sucks. I mean, they really look great. But I didn't understand the disconnect between the great bands, right? Like Hendrix and The Who and Stones and this shit. Like, this is what we've come up with. Like, it made no sense to me. So I desperately wanted to be in a glitter band because I love the way they looked, but I wanted to be in a band with players, guys who could actually play. I didn't even know what that meant, but my name was mentioned by a former drummer that I was in a band with to an agent in Jersey who happened to be repping a band called Silver Star. And they were a new glitter band, and they needed a guitar player. So my name showed up, and I answered I went to the audition, and all the guys were great players. This is the key. The singer was great, Michael Valentine. The drummer was a jazz drummer, Mel Anderson, whose brother Al was the guitar player in Bob Marley and the Wailers at this exact moment of February of 72. So what does Bob Marley and Twisted Sister have in common? Brothers. Most people don't know that, but it's true. Bass player Kenny Neal, best musician we've ever had in the band. Everyone will say it. Natural musician, play a song once, boom, looks at you like you're stupid. Like, you could play Rock and Roll Animal, Lou Reed, one time through. You could play, like one of the songs on that. It's very complicated. He listened to it once, okay. And I'm sitting there going, and he's like, "Are you retarded? What are you guys?" Perfect pitch, genius bass player. And Billy, the guitar player, was a great player. And these guys knew each other. They're all from Jersey, and they all had played in bands prior, meaning they understood the club scene. I knew nothing at all. And they hired me to be the fifth Beatle in this band. And the first two questions I asked was, how do we make money? And God, that name sucks. Silver Star. Like, one Quaalude, and who the hell's going to remember that shit? So that led to a bit of an argument with the drummer, because unbeknownst to me, the guy who brought me in, that was his baby. He named it. I mean, he was a good drummer, but I mean, in terms of an original thinker, he called himself Mel Starr. Oh, that's a tough one. Starr. Okay, that's a great last name. And the band Silver Star. How long do you think it took? How many seconds of brainstem do you think it took to come up with that idea? So I, being a cynical Jew from New York, not only did I say the name sucked, but I came up with my idea of a glitter band. And that name was the Max Factor. Now that's creative, right? That solves a lot of problems. Makeup, and you can't get sued. The Max Factor, what a concept. Oh, that went over like a lead balloon, like a cartoon, like a Wile E. Coyote off a cliff kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But we knew something was wrong, right? Something was wrong. The name was wrong. So we're now 6 weeks into rehearsal. Start early January of 73, and we're 6 weeks into rehearsal. And the lead singer, Michael, so we have a fight. And Michael goes out and gets drunk at some local bar where we were living. And he calls the house. And I pick up the phone. He goes, John, it's Michael. I wasn't JJ yet, right? It's just John. In fact, JJ doesn't come in for later. I decided to call myself Johnny Heartbreaker or Jonathan Livingston Seagal, because Seagull, like I was just trying every gimmick.
This is the guy who had a problem with Mel Starr.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, be careful. Royalties haven't come in yet. So, so Michael goes, I got a great name. What? Twisted Sister. I was like, wow, that's a great name. That's a great name. So I ran downstairs and I said, Michael just called with the greatest name, Twisted Sister. And everyone liked it except Mel, because he wanted to somehow preserve Silver Star, which was going to be voted off. Like that wasn't happening. So Michael comes back drunk from the bar. And sadly, I will say this, sadly, in reality, Michael was hit by a car many years ago. And although physically he's okay, mentally he has completely lost his memory. And so when I tried to get him to be in our documentary, he couldn't, because he didn't remember anything. So he doesn't remember this. So he comes back and he's drunk. I go, Michael, that was a great name. He goes, what name? I said, the name, Twisted Sister. What? I said, yeah, you thought of the name. You called us. And I'm thinking to myself, what's that cliche? If a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, doesn't make a sound. So what would happen if no one picked up that phone call? Poof.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be talking about Twisted Sister, would we? So that's it.
So a drunken.
But anyway, it's been a great podcast. It's been great.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I'll see you.
So that's a good point, actually, John, because one of the things that people can surmise from you so far is that there's a couple of things that I find remarkable about you, which I've told you before. So nothing new to you, but first of all, you have this unbelievable memory for detail. So you were very conscious and aware through the whole Twisted Sister journey. And a lot of that's because you did a lot of journaling and you wrote a lot of things down. You're a collector. You've got memorabilia from way back to the beginning of the band. So it's not that you just happened to remember. You were conscious of everything throughout your journey. And you're just a very gifted storyteller. So what I've learned is that there's no short answer to a question.
Which is good for you.
Yeah.
You guys just ask and sit back, right? You could do it. It's like a Grateful Dead song.
Well,
put it on and you go to the bed, take a bathroom break, right?
So I'm gonna share with our listeners just a little bit of when you and I first met. We met at a business conference. This is the short version of the story. We really hit it off. We sat down, we had breakfast, and you told me the Twisted Sister story. And one of the things that you said right out of the gate was, I understood very early on that there was no place for drugs in the business of rock and roll. And that the band Twisted Sister, that everybody, that people know, the ones that made it with Dee Snider as the front man, et cetera, was a drug-free band, but you just couldn't tell anybody because of you didn't want to ruin your reputation, which I thought was hilarious. But what I said to you was, you really need to write a book, and you need to get up on stage and tell the story. You need to be a speaker. And that resonated with you. You'd probably already been thinking about that anyway, but it's because you have that natural talent. So when we did our very first public extreme leadership event, which was called the Extreme Leadership Summit back in 2012 in San Diego, that was your debut as a speaker. And I remember you were kind of freaking out beforehand, which I thought was really funny, because you're the stage patter guy for Twisted Sister. So you were used to being up on stage in front of 100,000 people. And yet here you were coming to give a speech at a conference with 150, 120, 150 people, whatever it was.
Way more terrifying.
Yeah.
Actually.
And what we said, well, it was terrifying because it was a new venue and a new thing. So what we said was, I'll just sit on the side of the stage and I'll just hit play occasionally. I'll say, hey, tell us about what happened in 1970. And I hit the button and you went on, and it was phenomenal.
Well,
you tell the story for the stage.
I'd like to add some more.
Yeah.
There was two things about the band at the beginning. One is, I knew I didn't have the talent to make it without really talented partners. I needed a great, and I talk about this in the book. Success is easier, if you don't mind, he gets the credit and you bring people on. So I'm a reliable professional guy and a good guitar player, not great. But I can conceptualize a band and figure it out. And so that was my talents I brought to the band. So that was one. The second part of it, the drug thing, was I had already been a drug addict and a drug dealer and stopped all of it. And I didn't know about alcohol. I wasn't familiar because the hippie days were not full of alcohol. So there was no drinking in my scene. Maybe there was, but I certainly didn't see it. So when I joined the band, these were drinkers, and I didn't know how bad drinking could get. I had no idea. I just thought, you have a drink. And because I didn't know anything about drinking, I thought, well, maybe, okay, I'll drink because you're in bars. What else do you do in bars? But you drink. So my singer, Michael, who was a very professional drinker, said to me, fucko, you got to try it all. So one day at a bar that we knew, the guy pulls out, I don't know, whiskey and bourbon and just a whole, Johnny Walker, a whole slew of little shot glasses, trying to familiarize me. And I would take a sip and go, oh, God, that's disgusting. Oh, God, that tastes like cough medicine. Ugh. And I went down the line, Crown Royal. I'm like, this shit sucks, man. I mean, how do you drink this stuff? It's horrible. I can't get past it to get drunk because it tastes terrible. And then he goes, well, what about beer? And I said, well, the last time I drank a beer was when I was 13. I drank a 6-pack of beer and threw up. So I hadn't had a beer. So now I'm 20. So he gave me a bottle of Heineken. I drank that and went, oh, that tastes like piss. Why would anybody drink that? So that basically sealed my deal with alcohol. It had nothing to do with higher power or anything. Just why would you want to drink this shit? This is terrible. And because of that, I've had 6 beers in my entire life, and I've had them at the behest of a friend who says, come on, let's have a beer. And I'll have a beer, but it's 6. And I remember the 6 times because I got sick each time. I hate it. So I just didn't okay, it wouldn't have mattered that I didn't care about drinking, except the band was a heavy bunch of drinkers. And that eventually led to the demise of the band, which is in the book, which is in the documentary. And it got ugly because of the drinking. And it was at that point when the band was reforming with new people that I said, I can't have people who get high, that drugs aren't the answer and alcohol isn't the answer. So when Dee joined, he was very adamant. I hate alcohol. I hate drugs. Great. And when Mendoza joined, and the bass player that Mendoza replaced was an alcoholic who was an original member of the band and was a high functioning alcoholic, which means I didn't know he was a drinker. And eventually he told me he was a drinker and that to save his life, he had to join AA, which I admire him for. And then AA introduced him to the church. Then, as you know, the church came down to see Twisted Sister and told him the devil spoke through me and Dee. And I said, that's kind of funny because we're not the one with the problem. You're the alcoholic. We don't drink. We don't drugs. We don't do drugs. We don't cheat on our girlfriends. And, you're the one with the issue. So I don't know how the devil's talking through me. And he did agree with that logic. But I also said to him, as an alcoholic, you shouldn't be working in a bar. And it's true. Save yourselves. And Kenny has. So that was why I became completely against that, because it got in the way of success. And as Steve has heard me tell you many times, we went through band members who swore as we replaced them that they didn't get high, but they lied because they couldn't believe that we were really saying it. Why do you join a rock band if not to get wasted? That's what you do. That's what we are. We're a society of wasted, fucked up individuals who allow you to act like a 14-year-old because that's the rules of the rock life, which most people love and is a fantasy. Ergo, politician gets busted with a 16-year-old girl in a hotel room and cocaine, he's done. An athlete gets busted in a hotel with a 16-year-old girl and cocaine, he's done. A lead guitar player, 16, hey, yo, let's write a song about that, man. That'll be the new song or the lead single. It's like
that was the assumption that everybody projected on you guys because that's what everybody.
Yeah. And we played to it because we didn't want to you know what, Steve, this is so interesting. I never proselytized about it. Internally, everybody knew. Musicians knew, don't ask us to party with you because we're not going to party with you because we're just not going to, except that one of the members of the band did socially drink. But it didn't bother me. But the replacements for the drummers that we went through, like Spinal Tap, they all lied. One of them was on, we'd say to them, you do understand you can't drink and do drugs. Sure. No, you really understand that. Yeah. So you don't, right? No. So of course, 2 months later, you're fucked up. I'll never do it again. Excuse. Now, one guy, I remember he said, you can't drink and do drugs. I go, no, he goes, well, I'm not going to be in the band. I said, thank you very much. You obviously, thanks for not lying to me and wasting my time, because it's enormous time wasters. They're enormous time wasters. So yes, we became that way because we couldn't afford to lose time to become successful trying to deal with someone's substance abuse problems. And it doesn't mean I'm not sensitive to someone's substance abuse problems, but why, Steve, should it be any different from any other company? Business is business, right? So if you're working like us 5 or 6 days a week and you are keeping to a very heavy schedule where you wake up at 2 p.m, you get to the club at 6, you do your sound check at 7, you do your first show at 10, you finish at 4 a.m, you get back home at 6 o'clock in the morning, you sleep, you wake up, you do the same thing 5 nights a week. And on the 6th day you rehearse. How do you keep that up unless you are clear-eyed and straight instead of trying to recover? What's that old Sinatra line? I pity people who don't drink because when they get up in the morning, that's the best they're going to feel all day. That's a famous line. Well, when you don't drink and do drugs, you don't have to worry about that, right? So as bizarre as it sounds, yes, we're straight. And then we started telling people in interviews, and the record label was like, oh, no, don't tell people you're straight. Well, we want to lie. No, just don't answer the question. Just avoid it. So in order to create the image of us being out of control, we became a very volatile, loud, cursing band to be portrayed as absolutely insane, which led to Twisted fucking Sister, sick motherfucker. Because the more you curse, the more you kind of, you take the impetus. Oh, they got to be crazy.
Right.
You got to be crazy. I did 2 marathons. I remember when I came in to finishing the first marathon, fans of mine were positive I did the last 2 miles on coke. Like, how could you run a marathon? You got to be doing blow. Okay. So yeah. So we were really warned off talking about it. And then, and then time went on. I got sick of pretending. I said, I'm proud. I'm proud of it. That's why we lasted this long. Now, Keith Richards has another deal with the devil. I don't understand how Keith functions. God bless him. I mean, God bless Keith Richards. I mean, I met his gastroenterologist at a party, and those are those words you don't tend to want to say at the same line. But Keith Richards, gastroenterologist, and I met him, and I wanted to ask him what the secret was, and he goes, "You can't ask me a question," and I said, "Okay, one question." He goes, "Well, maybe," and I went, "Are even you amazed?" And the guy goes, "Yes, I am amazed." So Keith has some sort of, I mean, I read his book. If you read Keith's book, it's extraordinary. In fact, if you read Eric Clapton's book, if you read books about guys who have survived after extraordinary amounts of drug and alcohol use, their common story, Steve, is that at some point, a tipping point occurs, right? Something happens, which is the last time they do it, right? Everyone has that story. Every person who has survived severe substance abuse who's lived will say, this happened this time, and this was the catalyst. So in Keith's book, his story was that, he threw up in front of his 10-year-old son, Marlon, for the last time in an embarrassing, drug overdose. And the band was terrified to go and talk to Keith to get him up for a show. So they'd send his 10-year-old son in to wake him up. Think about this. This is your Keith Richards, Rolling Stones, $1 million company, right? $1 million touring company. But your band members won't go into your hotel room to wake you up because they're afraid of disturbing you. So they convince you to hire your son to come around on tour because your son, you're not going to yell at your son. So the 10-year-old son, Marlon, would go in and wake up his dad, and Keith would wake up and throw up. At some point, Keith went, "I'm sick of throwing up in front of my son. I'm sick of embarrassing myself in front of him." Consequently, from what I understand, Marlon hates drugs and alcohol. I mean, hates it. Now, what's interesting about that is how many times do we hear that bad habits are picked up by the kids, right? It propagates. So it can go either way. Either the kid's going to follow your lead or reject it.
Kind of rejected. Yeah, that's right.
Rejected. In Marlon's case, he rejected it. So, and Eric Clapton's description was just, I don't get into it, but there was an episode that happened. And I'm reading this episode and I'm going, this is a guitar hero of mine. This is Eric Clapton. And this is what he did. This is how it finally came down. And you just read it and you go, God, it's pathetic. I didn't want to be pathetic. And I didn't want to be in a band with pathetic guys. I mean, if we wanted to hate each other, let's hate each other for real reasons, not, and Steve, as you, again, in business, if you are fighting the pillow of recovery, you can't make clear-eyed choices,
right?
Because you can't even get to the problem, right? Because you got this pillow of haze around you. So I think why we bonded was because you heard me tell the story and you're going, wow, this is a business. This is not what I thought. And
so let's build on that for a little bit, because first of all, just in terms of the business of music, there's the artist side of the equation, and then there's the management side of the equation, simply put, right? Now you happen to be in both of those roles, right? So you're a musician, you're a guitar player, you're a part of the whole artistic side of the band, but you're also the business guy, right? Is that unusual for one person to wear both of those hats? Well,
you're a student of rock and roll, and you've probably read a million stories. Do you know any bands with a band manager player? I mean, do you know many? I mean, do you know baseball teams with player managers? Do you know? It's rare. I mean, I know in rock too, Mick Fleetwood. And by the way, after reading his ex-wife's book, I don't even know how. I mean, I asked her, I said, how did he function as a manager if he's that stoned on coke? And that's not me saying anything bad about it. This is out in a book. And I want to interview him. I want to interview Mick because he is one of those guys. And Steve Miller is another one of those guys. So they are completely separate talents. I'm not a musician. I am a businessman that plays guitar. That's the best way I can put it. So go ahead.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're a business. So your kind of makeup, your psychological, not makeup, not the kind of makeup you guys used to wear, but the makeup, your psychological makeup is you're very business oriented. You have that entrepreneur's instinct and sensibility and all that. But you're also driven by the love for the music. So when you go back to the early days And I won't ask you to tell the whole story, but again, it's you had that moment where you said, music, that's what I want to do. You fell in love with the Beatles early on, but there was also the business person in you. So you discovered both the love for music and this propensity towards business very early on, and you brought the two of them together. Was that a conscious choice for you? I mean, you just said you're a business guy who plays guitar. Well, there's a lot of business guys who play guitar. I happen to be one of them, but you're actually in the business of, or were for most of your life in the business of music. So was it like, I'm going to bring these two instincts together, or was it just was more of an organic process?
No, it was organic. I mean, first of all, as you know my story, I was a drug dealer for 5 years between the ages of 15 and 20. And I'm a New York City kid. When I say drug dealer, let me be really clear. I sold a lot of weed. I was ahead of my time by 50 years. Now everybody's selling weed. It's a big freaking deal. I sold a lot of weed. I needed money. My parents had no money. I wanted to buy gear. I figured out how to sell weed fast and made a lot of money fast and fueled it for 5 years while I bought my guitars and amps and traveled around the world and did stuff, and luckily got out of the business before things got stupid. But here's the thing. Right now there's a show on CNN, I think, and I forget the guy's name, but it's called Street of Dreams, in which he picks a street and discusses the history of the street. And his first Street of Dreams story was 47th Street, the Diamond District. And the second Street of Dreams was the main street of Nashville, right? In which he gets behind the music business, right? And I'm watching these two back to back. Well, 48th Street was my Street of Dreams. 48th Street was where all the music stores were, Music Row in New York City. The Diamond District was 1 block away. So my father worked in the Diamond District, and I went to 48th Street. So if you're ever going to consider the fast-paced jive BS of New York, nothing could be more exemplary of that than the con job on 47th Street and the con job of 48th Street, right? So if you learn how to get, so my father would take me to 47th Street and I'd see how that whole shtick worked, how that hustle worked. And I would go to 48th Street and learned out that hustle worked. The hustle part, the New York City street vibey thing, that kind of gets in you, right? That gets in you. So when I started dealing weed, it was kind of like my father was a salesman. It was natural, it was kind of like, and also, even though the Beatles made me want to become a rock star, I didn't want to own a guitar like the Beatles. And I didn't want to play Beatles songs. I mean, I think about this a lot. For a band that influenced me so much, why didn't I care? And as you know, I didn't really get, the switch didn't turn on until I heard Mike Bloomfield and the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. That was the switch, that switch, which I was 16 or 15. So 15. So it coincided with my desire to finally apply myself as a guitar player, and my dealing weed happened at the exact same time. So here I am playing guitar, buying guitars, selling weed, going to the Fillmore East, on, and weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend, reinforcing my desires and my dreams, my rock stardom, and dealing and being high. And let's throw in anti-war activities. Let's not take that out. And let's talk about high school rebellion. Let's not take that out. And let's talk about the law. I sued the Board of Education for handing out an underground newspaper. Let's not take that out. So you're rolling all of these forces, these mega New York forces, the street sense, 47th Street hustle, 48th Street hustle, drug dealing, politics, rock and roll in a volatile mix of the 60s. As I say this to you, it really is why I am the way I am. This is a combination of all those things. I didn't sit back and go, I am a business guy, and I didn't sit back and go, I just was me trying to figure out what that was. And when I joined Twisted, I was just a band member. I didn't care. I wasn't involved in anything. I was told where to go, what to do, how to dress. Pretty simple. That's it. I was happy. I was very happy. It wasn't until the band fell apart and I didn't trust other people to put it back together, that's when I took over.
So the situation called on your already kind of internal ability,
innate knowledge or something.
Yeah. Okay, so now fast forward. We're a Twisted Sister was over, and tell us the story of when the band came back together, because you have this whole chapter of the band's history where that ended with your last tour. What was that? 2 years ago now? 3 years ago? How long ago was that? 4 years?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. 10 minutes ago, 4 years. What's the difference nowadays? So first of all, the story about how you guys came back together is fascinating to me.
So we stopped in 87 and that was the end of it. And Dee and I fell apart, and it was acrimonious. It wasn't because of drugs and alcohol. It was just because ego and failure. And it fell apart. And I thought, okay, well, I have to rebuild my life, which I didn't expect to do at the age of 34. So I remarried, and I got a job as a stereo salesman. And there I was as a stereo salesman on the East Side. And even though
this is after We're Not Going to Take It, after I Want to Rock, after MTV, after the platinum records, after gold records.
Yeah. Now
you're selling.
Well, actually, before I'm selling stereos, I'm actually working an overnight shift at a pool hall. Okay. So I knew a guy who owned a gym chain, and he wanted to get in the music business, and he had a nephew he wanted to manage, and he wanted to know if I'd be into management. I said I would, but I need money. And he goes, well, I'm opening up a pool hall with 8 of my former partners. They were all New York City narcotics detectives. And by the way, I'm totally, let me just say, my drug use ended in 72. So there's no drugs. There's no drugs. So I said to him, I need money. I just filed for bankruptcy and I have nothing. And he said, I'll pay you $400 a week, but we'll manage my nephew, but you need to work. So you can work at this pool hall on Broadway overnight. And he said, but I know that you need some dignity. So you tell people you're an owner. So, he said, so if anybody says, why are you here? It's my place.
Oh, wow.
Which was fine. So I worked overnight till 2 a.m. every morning at this pool hall on 75th and Broadway, thinking this is how this is winding up. I'm running a late night pool hall. This is where John French, JJ French, Twisted running pool hall. The funny story with that is one night, a couple of wise guys, they had to be wise guys. They came in to shake the place down, and they were like, so who owns the place? I go, why? He says, well, we think we need to talk to the owner. He's not here right now. Well, here's our card. I think it would be to their benefit that you hand the card. So I said, oh, okay. So listen, it's owned by 9 retired detectives in the New York Harlem precinct. Which one of those would you like me to hand the card to? And he took the card back and he went, on second thought, have a very nice day. And I thought to myself, wow, that's easy. Which one of the retired detectives would you like me to hand this card to? On second thought, I think I'll take my card back. So anyway, that management company didn't last too long. We managed the guy's nephew, a wonderful artist named Andy Fortier, who wrote the song with that line, when the roof caves in and lets the sun shine in, that I quote all the time. Wonderful guy, great artist, great singer, songwriter. Unfortunately didn't make it. And so now I'm back home, no job. And my wife is making money. I feel useless, completely useless. Totally useless to the point of almost having a nervous breakdown. And my wife bought a copy of Tony Robbins' Wake Up the Sleeping Giant. Awaken the Sleeping Giant. Within, whatever.
Yeah.
So she buys it for me. And I'm reading a couple of chapters, and he's saying, when you're that bereft of anything, you need something. You just need one thing. So just do one positive thing. And I went, he's probably right. You need a victory. right? You need a victory. So I used to be a client of a very high-end hi-fi company where I could afford to buy stereos. And I walked in there and they knew me as JJ, the customer. And I walked in and I said, listen, the band's off the road and I know so much about this stuff. And, why waste my time? And the guy goes, why? Would you like to work here? You know more about this stuff than most people. I went, yeah. So they hired me. So now I'm a stereo salesman. And there were some nights where at 6 o'clock, I had to sweep up the store. And I'm thinking, I'm a stereo salesman. That's where it's winding up, selling stereos. Just like Dad, I'm a salesman. He sold jewelry, I'm selling stereos. And as luck would have it, a band called Seven Dust, which I had been following for years and helping them out as they went through various permutations, asked me to manage them. And I said I would. And I produced a demo and the demo got a record deal. And I was still working at the stereo store. And they became more and more successful. And I didn't have to work at the stereo store. So I managed them full time. And then we parted ways. And then my second wife, she left me for somebody else. And I was down again. And just as that point happened, 9/11 occurs, right? And 9/11 is the catalyst that brings it back. So why? Because we were asked to play a benefit. And we did. We played a benefit, raised a lot of money. And we still weren't talking. We did the rehearsals without really talking much. And we did the benefit and we helped raise money. And then that was it. I didn't think anything was going to happen, but word got out that the band was back together. And then the rest is history. All of a sudden, everybody wanted the band and they were offering us these gigs and the band came back. So it's a crazy road through all that. And then, by the way, as that was finally ending, because my drummer died in 2015 and the reunion was 14 years into it. It was supposed to be 2 years. I thought, what's the next chapter? People talk about, somebody said to me, you got 3 chapters in your life. You're young and then Twisted Sister. And then now. I said, no, dude, you've got it all wrong. I said, I've got 20 chapters in my life. And said, and Twisted alone has 4 chapters. He said, what do you mean? I said, we were the bar band. We were the video band. We were the defunct band. And then we were the festival band. I said, and that's over a 45-year period. I said, that's just Twisted. So I said to myself, as the book is going, as Steve and I are talking, and Steve is getting me to do motivational speaking, I'm going, I like motivational speaking. I like it. I like doing it. I'm a performer. I like telling the story. And I like to not have to rely on anybody else, just me. I have to ask a guitar player, a drummer. And we got a book deal. And then I'm thinking, what's the next chapter? What's the next chapter? And the next chapter is podcasting. And as my daughter is fond of saying, if I could make money speaking, I'll be the richest person on earth, or talking, as she puts it. And yes, and Steve, so here's what Steve did, everybody. Here's exactly what's...
Why are you talking about me in the third person?
Because this is exactly what Steve Farber did. He says to me, you're going to do this thing, Extreme, the leadership, and I'm going to advertise you and I'm thinking to myself, I am not going to do, I can't, there's no way. So as it turns out, he books this date, and that date was originally like May 9th, 2012. And lo and behold, I warned Steve that if a festival was offered to the band, that's my first, I got to do the festival. And we got offered a festival. I was like, whew. I said, Steve, dude, I told you it could happen. Sorry, but thank you. And you went, I'll just move the date. I'm like, no, you can't move the date. Yes, I can. No, you can't. You cannot move that date. Of course I can move that date. It's my thing. I can do whatever the hell I want to do. No. So Steve moves the date. Now I'm touring through Europe that whole summer. And every day Sharon's going, did you write? Do you know what you're going to say? Tomorrow. You know what you're going to say? What are you going to say? Tomorrow. This goes all summer long. So now it's the day before I fly out to San Diego. Well, do you have it ready? I went, no. She goes, are you kidding? You are being given this great position and you have nothing on paper? And I said, I'm going to write it on the plane flight out, 6 hours. So I brought a legal pad and a pencil, and I spent 6 hours. Do you remember? I get to you come to the hotel room. I am shaking. I go, well, I got these ideas. And you look at them and you go, I'll tell you what. I'll sit there on the side and I'll ask you questions. And, you answer them, and then let's see where it goes. And you did, and it went. And all of a sudden, the butterfly comes out, right? And the stories, and it changed everything. And that's really it. So if you hadn't have pushed it, it never would have happened, or it would have happened in a different way. But I'm not immune to knowing that it's always takes something, right? To make the move. Someone's got to show some faith. Someone gives you the break. Someone gives you the opening. As you pay it forward, you talk about it all the time. Because of that, because of your sensitivity to that, I mentor a musician in New York. She was a schoolmate of my daughter's, who's just a great musician. I love her. I give her free lessons. I hang out anytime she wants to call me, anytime I can make her show, anytime I can quote on her Facebook. I do everything I can do to support her. I want nothing from her except maybe a thank you if she ever gets an award. But I love it. I love it. And I do it because you instilled in me that it's a responsibility that we have, so.
Well, thank you for that. And I, then there was the project of the book. Because that also, it was pretty clear. I mean, I know you really wanted to tell your story, and the book needed to be written. And you had a couple of false starts with a couple of other potential co-authorships.
Yeah.
But finally, we just decided we'll do it together. And for me, it was a very different kind of a project, right? Because I've written 4 books, but it's the first time I worked on a book where I'm telling somebody else's story. So we co-authored the book, but it's your book and it's your story and it's written in your voice. My job was to make it work on the page, is the way that I kind of looked at it. But the other thing that came out of it was, as we were trying to figure out how do we tell the Twisted Sister story from the J.J. French perspective, which is not just the story about music, but it's also a business lesson because you're a business guy, right? So that led us to this idea that this would be, and you coined, what's the term that you coined?
Bizwar.
A bizwar.
Yeah, business book and a memoir. Rom-com, dramedy, bizwar.
Bizwar. Not to be confused with boudoir, by the way. But so then in that process, it was like, well, how do we construct the business lesson in this? So talk a little bit about the framework, the business framework, and not to go into depth into each one because we're going to run out of time, but what's the kind of the business person entrepreneur's lesson that you're teaching folks now?
So I think this has taken quite a while, and it's been good that it's taken a while because a lot of thoughts have gone through the brain, including a presentation to do motivational speaking. Like, how do you do motivational speaking? And everybody has I don't mean to sound cynical, but every motivational speaker has a shtick, and but you have to have a framework. You have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have to have a lesson you're teaching. You have to have a reason why you're teaching it, and eventually you do it enough and I didn't have that. I had these stories. I just had these random stories, and they're all great. And there's millions of them. And I could speak for hours, as Steve knows. But I think the day that I thought of how this could work, I was so excited. I called you up and I said, I came up with a great idea, an easy thing for people to remember. If I just have to attach the right words, I have a home run. And the idea was the twisted method of reinvention, TWISTED. Tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. This was the format. And within those letters encompasses about every story I ever want to tell that relates to those letters. And when you're doing a motivational speaking, engagement. And you go, Twisted method. Everybody can remember. Very simple. They'll know Twisted. And you just go tenacity, wisdom, and spirit. You put it up on a screen. I don't like PowerPoints. I don't like to waste a lot of time, but simple ones, 2 words, or Twisted, wisdom. So people attach the stories, and it allowed us a framework for the book. It allowed a reason to go from piece to piece to piece to piece to piece. And I was thrilled that I came up with a market. The whole key is marketing, isn't it? I mean, you need to market something that people can remember. And it allows for many, many, many offshoots. So I'm really happy. And that's how we framed. And Steve came up with Twisted Business. So I think the book is called Twisted Business, We're Not Going to Take It, which is perfect because everybody knows we're not going to take it. You may not know who Twisted Sister is, but
Actually, we're not going to take it anymore.
True. We're not going to take it anymore. Yeah. So and then of course it didn't hurt that Twisted's songs continued to be so successful. So even as bad as last year was because of COVID, we had Facebook Song of the Year. They did I Wanna Rock for the Super Bowl. My luck, they ran it in the last 2 minutes of the Super Bowl when the most people were watching it. So I had a great run with Facebook on I Wanna Rock, which is the least of the 2 popular songs, right? Not even We're Not Going to Take It. And then other songs came in on some other TV shows. But we are the number 1 or number 2 licensed heavy metal band in the world, music-wise. So that helps the recognition factor. Sorry?
Who's number 1?
Well, I would say we're number 1, number 2. I don't know who else because I've asked a lot of people, how many people have more songs than us? Nobody can come up with it. That doesn't mean, by the way, that Def Leppard, AC/DC, Kiss don't have enormous songs. I don't mean to say that. What I am saying is that for reasons that are impossible to ever have predicted, these 2 songs seem to be used more and more and more and more and more. And the way Madison Avenue functions, the more something is used, the more something is used, because familiarity is what sells products, which is why Don't Stop Believing by Journey is on 8 billion things, and why I Feel Good by James Brown is on every medicine commercial on the planet. I mean, my joke was that why is I Feel Good? Because a bunch of fat guys sitting around a table in Madison Avenue, and they go, okay, guys, we got a new drug, Falabalab. What are we going to use? And he goes, how about I Feel Good by James Brown? That's it. Now, because it's in every damn commercial. So yesterday, I'm watching TV, I'm reading a magazine, and I hear We're Not Going to Take It being used in a upcoming Disney movie like Spot. And right after that, I Feel Good that comes up, this time in a KFC commercial. But the point is they were back to back. And I thought to myself, this is a freaking example.
So you guys make that's kind of ongoing revenue primarily from We're Not Going to Take It and I Want to Rock, right?
Licensing those and re-records our own versions of them, which is important as a distinction. Because if you sell your own version, you keep 100% of the master recording. If you sell the record company version, it's 50%. So you want to sell your own version. Well, you'll say, well, why doesn't everybody do it? That's a good question. I don't know. Everybody should. I mean, I tell every band I know, like Foreigner, Joan Jett, re-record your biggest hits, and then market them because you'll keep more money. This is not the only clause in a record deal that is not indentured servitude. Is a clause in all their arrogance. They thought when they invented this crap called a record contract, the people who created the record contract were so arrogant. They figured after 5 years, who cares? After 5 years, you're dead. So they said after 5 years, you can re-record your song. Ha! Little did they know.
So the most of the versions of We're Not Going to Take It, for example, is a version that you guys re-recorded?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and I Want to Rock, but you have to match it pretty close.
Yeah, well, you guys the songs like 100,000 times. It would have been pretty easy for you to match it, right?
Well, yes and no. Let me say this to you. Take a song that you love like love, 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 like you've heard a million times.
Yeah.
Like, let's say, just take like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan.
Okay.
You hear that song, any change in that song, you can tell. Like if it's live, you can tell. If it's right, anything that isn't exactly that record, you will know, right? You just will know. So,
but are you going to know it in like a 10-second snippet?
Not necessarily. No. But what will happen is the ad agency will say, well, is the re-record, because you sell it a little cheaper to make the money? Well, is it exactly like, okay, we'll use it, but I want to make sure it sounds exactly like, so they'll play them back to back, right, just to make sure. So when we first did the re-records, we were singing a half step down at that point, so we didn't know. So we'd send out the songs and we get, doesn't sound anything like the original. What do you mean? It's the exact same arrangement. No, sorry. There's something you guys, what are you tuning all? They don't know. So we put them on and realized it was a half step down. Oh, Jesus. We had to go back in the studio, tune up to A440. Now, sometimes they use the original. So for example, video games that advertise original master recording on the box, they will use original master recordings. That they don't care. That's what they're advertising. There was a movie out based on video games a couple of years ago, Steven Spielberg, and they said original, and they used a ton of 80s songs, only used the original masters. Well, that's what it is, but for everything else, it's Memorex. Everything else, it's us. So, right. So it's good.
Cool. So now, current day, current chapter, John J.J. French started out as John French Segal, John J.J. French, musician, business guy, licensing guy, marketing guy, now podcaster, The French Connection, which is really good, off to an amazing start. What a great show that is.
Thank you.
You've had some incredible guests already. And then, of course, the book coming out later this year. Twisted Business. We're not going to take it anymore. And it's I'm very excited about that, not only because I was involved in the project, but because I'm just really excited to see how the world responds to your incredible story.
Can I plug something here?
Yeah.
So yes, my podcast is fun, and Steve Farber and Tommy Spaulding are going to be guests on my podcast coming up. And that podcast is going to be about motivational speaking and how they got into it and how they approach it, because I met Steve and Tommy at the same time. Steve hired Tommy to talk, and I saw them both and were blown away by both. They're both incredibly polished and have great stories to tell and have best-selling books. And I want them on the show together because there's a connection that we all have, which is important. And I'll do that. I interviewed Don McLean yesterday, American Pie. That episode is airing next Tuesday on my podcast, which is on Podcast One, Apple, and Spotify, the JJ French Connection Beyond the Music. So this week's guest is Nathan Seifert, who's written the #1 country hit Holy for Florida Georgia Line, who happened to be a personal friend of Sharon's because he worked for Sharon in the back room of one of the internet companies. And he wanted to go to LA, and now he's one of the hottest songwriters in the United States. He followed his dream. His story is incredible. He's an amazing guy. His story's on now. I've had Rob Halford for Judas Priest. I've had Mike Portnoy, the #1 drummer in the world. I've had members of Whitesnake and Lynyrd Skynyrd, and Def Leppard. Coming up, I have Elliot Easton from The Cars, with Andy Babuke, who are in a band together. But Andy Babuke has written 2 Beatle bestsellers on Beatles gear book. Like, if you want to know what bass Paul played at 4:00 in the afternoon on January 30th, he knows, and those people are crazy. They're freaking nuts, but they're going to be on the show together. I'm having a lot of fun putting these shows together and picking people to have on these shows. Nuno Betancourt is one of the greatest guitar players in the world, an extreme. He's on an episode. But yesterday I did Don McLean, who was funny and told me the story of American Pie in ways that you never heard it before. And you should listen to it starting next Tuesday. And then I did one today with country superstar Johnny Lee, who I have to tell you, I didn't really think I knew until I realized that he wrote "Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places," and realized, oh my God, this guy's had one of the biggest country hits in the world. And he's 74 years old. He just signed a new record deal. And I just did an interview with him, and he texted his manager to say that was the best interview he's ever done. Like, he was great. I don't think he knew what he was getting into with me. I don't think he knew that I was going to give him the platform to express as an artist what he needed to express. I think he thought, oh, some guy in Twisted Sister, what does he know? Well, after he heard my Johnny Cash story, he fell in love with me. You know what I'm saying? So Johnny Lee is great. He's coming up, and like I said, Don McLean is coming up, and I've got so many cool shows coming up because they're based around things that I actually love, and I'm really enjoying it. And it is the next chapter of my life. So pay attention to that podcast, and especially when Steve and Tommy are coming up on that podcast, because that's going to be a lot of fun.
Cool. So what's the best way? Is there? Do you got a website nowadays, or should people just go to find you on Podcast One and connect with you that way?
Well, yeah, you have to subscribe to either Spotify or Apple or Podcast One. It's not a link that's just general, so you have to be on one of them. You just put the JJ French Connection, JAY. If you just put JJ, you won't get it. It has to be J.
Put in John French Segal.
No, I don't think so.
Not going to work.
Not going to work. The JJ French Connection, and you can get that. I mean, my Wikipedia has been redone, so now it's like official. Yes, I have a website, but nobody goes to websites anymore. You know, it's kind of like life has changed. No one buys CDs. No, people either stream or buy vinyl. Go figure. You think that would ever be the case? I don't play CDs anymore. What do you do? I listen to records or I stream?
Right.
Oh my God, life is definitely strange.
The coexistence of opposite things. Cool. All right, man. Well, listen, it's been a lot of fun sharing you with my listening audience, and I'm looking forward to the book coming out, and we're going to have a great time with that. So everybody needs to stay tuned for, the post COVID, whenever that is. We'll be out there hitting the road with this stuff.
Yeah, I think the publishing date is August 3rd, I believe.
I think we're not entirely sure about that.
Almost.
But yeah, somewhere around.
Close.
Yeah.
Close. Yeah. And then Steve and I will be performing together. This is like Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
It'll be wonderful. Laurel and Hardy. I mean, come on, all those famous duo, Martin and Lewis. Steve and I will be doing, or you, me, and Tommy will be the Three Stooges. I don't know.
Cool. All right. John, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. And thanks everybody for listening. Until next time, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Love is Just Damn Good Business with Steve Farber. Join us again next time, because when customer and employee satisfaction just isn't enough anymore, we are here to back you up with specific ideas to operationalize love to make an enormous difference in your business, personal life, and the world around you. Visit our website at stevefarber.com to leave a review. And don't forget to share the love with your colleagues and friends, because after all, it's just damn good business.